Alrighty, we're going to get started with our veteran coaches panel here at our kickoff. Oh good, got the video switched. It'll be an opportunity for you guys to ask questions. We've got 4 veteran coaches from our program here, and I'll be walking around with the mic to pass it if you have any questions, but I will let our speakers, our panelists, introduce themselves, and we'll get started.
Good morning. My name is Roland Olson. I'm coach of Team 16048, currently called the Nerd Herd, but there's some debate on our name this year, so we'll see what that turns out to be.
I'm Lane Kirk. This is my 5th season coaching a team, actually 2 teams this year again. Don't recommend it. We teach or coach an elementary school team at Dry Creek, and we coach a team at Alta Sierra.
Yeah, Ken Kirk, also 5th year coaching with the 2 teams at Electric Legos and Technical Difficulties.
Eric Person, I'm not coaching this year. This is my first time in 9 years not coaching, so.
Long time involved. And Ronald actually took a team. Roland, sorry. I'm terrible with names, sorry. Roland took a team. The Nerd Herd went to Houston last year. So there's some cool experience there. So does anyone have any questions to start off?
Hi, my name is Kosar. I'm first time coaching a team at Fuchman. I have 4th graders and 1 5th grader. And I've been looking at stuff online, but basically wanted to get an idea of when you would suggest we have like our idea down by. I mean, I don't have teaching experience. Sometimes it's hard to get the kids focused in one area. So as just a basic timeline, how many weeks should I spend with the kids talking about everything under the sun when it comes to water?
So all 8 of the teams I worked with were different. As I was going through coaching both on the robot, I actually think it's more important on the robot, but also on the project. I think it's really important to have a time at the start of a decision-making process to just share ideas without evaluating them, of just coming up with ideas. I would tell my team, I don't want to hear any discussion of decisions until you have 3 ideas on the table. They should always be able to come up with, this is fun, this is fun, this is fun. We had a ground rule that once you shared an idea, it was the team's idea, not a person's idea. That you were allowing it to be modified and discussed and all that. But, you know, it's not very long until the qualifiers start. So I think you're talking about maybe 2 meetings of sort of brainstorming and trying stuff before you want to start making decisions.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Depending on which qualifier you pick, you could be looking at early November to mid-December. So obviously the registration for the qualifiers won't start until I think it's end of September or something. But once you have an idea of which qualifier you want to do, or at least a general timeline, work backwards from there and kind of reverse engineer it. You know that you'll need to share your solution once you have it. You know you need to formulate a solution. Before you do that, you need to research a problem. So kind of backing into the steps that you have to do to kind of come up with, well, how long do we need to share? Maybe that's a week or 2. Before that, how long do we need to formulate a solution? Maybe that's a week or 2. How long do we need to research? A week or 2. So then you're backing into when you need to start. But the whole process, at least for the project, I'd say at least 6 weeks, if not longer.
So at the competition, there's the robot aspect, the project aspect. Is there anything else that gets judged?
Yeah, the core values as well. You'll have 3 judging sessions, and those are very important for the teams. So they'll go in, they'll do the project judging where they do their 5-minute presentation and then 5-minute Q&A with the judges. They'll do a robot design judging session where they present their robot, show a mission run or 2, and then talk about their programming and everything. And then in core values, they have to do some kind of team challenge that they'll find out about the day of the competition, right when they walk in the room. They won't know about it ahead of time. But the judges are looking for how well do they work together as a team, what is their decision-making process as a team, their creativity, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and so it's called a judging block, and so you have those back to back to back. So when you leave for those judging sessions, you want to make sure you have all your materials for all three of those things. You need to have your robot and any documentation. You need to have your project and any props, because you're going to go off for those 10-minute sessions and not come back to your pit area until after then. So the robot game is the public portion that everybody can watch. And that's the most exciting part for most, because they can visually see how they're doing on the scoreboard. They can watch the matches. The judges is all behind closed door, those sessions. So only the coaches and the team can go in there. And that's really where they prove who they are as a team. So they are definitely weighted very, very heavily, despite what the team looks like they're doing on the scoreboard. You need to pay a lot more attention to the details of their project and their robot design, and they need to know those core values. The list of 8, they need to start memorizing. They need to start exhibiting those in practice, and even outside of the robotics situation. They need to show how they can exhibit those in the classroom, on their soccer field, even within their families. We even had a talk with our kids this morning who are at home getting along with one another. They were like, remember your core values, we're a team and you need to work together to, make sure you all come out of this alive.
Yeah, CVR has the judging rubrics online. You can download and go through those. I would suggest going through those with your team to see what they're being judged on at each of the 3 judging sessions. It's very valuable for them to go through, even if you're practicing at home with your project. Do their project, go through the presentation, then sit down with them on that judging rubric and ask them, how do you think you did? Because it spells out very clearly in each section what you need to get those higher scores.
And just to go off that a little bit, so the judging blocks that Lane mentioned, they're between 45 to 48 minutes, and so you have 30 minutes of session followed by 6-minute breaks between. The order which you will go through the sessions is kind of random. It depends on where you fall in the schedule. You'll either start with core values, you may start with robot design, depends. So it's very important, again, to bring all of your stuff with you. Depending on where the judging rooms are in relation to the pits, it may be very tight if you have to run back to go grab something. So it's very important to bring that. In the project rubrics, first updated the project rubric like Thursday. So next week we will be publishing that to the website. It's a minor change, but definitely important to read that. And you will get your rubrics back online through my CVR after the event. So judges fill that out, provide feedback to you, and that can be used to help for next season, or if you advance to championship, provide guidance on how to improve there.
So just a quick follow-up. A lot of teams, and particularly new teams, don't realize that the robot game scores have very minimal impact on the awards. If you're in the top, I think it's 40% at champs of robot game scores, then you're eligible for awards. The percentages may change, and look those up. But the judging sessions determine the majority of the awards. And you may have the greatest robot on the planet, and if the team can't communicate how they came up with that design or what's great about that design, they'll score very poorly, even though their robot can get the most points on the field. And so those judging sessions really are, in a lot of ways, the competition. And one of the things that transformed the teams I was coaching from middle of the pack to starting to advance was realizing that I had to coach the students on making their thinking visible. So for example, the core values session we had at World Festival, they had about a 12-foot diameter rope ring on the floor and a paper bag in the middle, and they're supposed to get some things into the paper bag without stepping into the rope ring, and coaching the kids that they can't just make decisions in their little kid speak. They have to state their ideas loud enough so the judges can hear their thinking. They have to make it visible to the judges what they're doing and why, and that just totally changed it. That it became about communicating what they're doing, not just can they do it. But those judging sessions really are the competition, and let the kids have fun with the robot game. That's a great motivator, but they have to be able to communicate what they're doing.
Yes, so the robot game hurdles, it's 75%, so in the top 75% of the rankings to be eligible to be considered for advancement. But advancement is ultimately decided by how the teams rank in judging. So the 75% is more of just a filter on which teams the judges can talk about. The 40% comes from champions. You have to be in the top 40% of teams in robot game ranking to be eligible for the Champions Award, which is the highest award a team can win. So the Champions Award kind of represents the most well-rounded team, so high in robot game and high in all the judging sessions. Yeah, I think that follows up there.
So there's 3 sections of judging, right? So what percentage is allotted of awards or points or whatever to each section? Basically, what should be focused on? And then the second question I had was for the core values and how they work as a team. Are there examples that we can practice available online?
I'll take the first part. So all judging sessions are equally weighted. So the judges, they're in the season standards manual. We have a breakdown of how the judging process works, and they're equally weighted, and we basically do a golf score approach based on how they're ranked in each individual room. But the judging sessions are a third each.
Just because the judging sessions are weighted equally doesn't mean your team has to weight those activities perfectly equally. What we discover is more important than what we win. When we were focused on how are we preparing for a competition, we didn't do well. When we focus on we have to make sure we check all the boxes, but then I let the team sort of shape what their season looks like a lot and sort of pick where they're going to emphasize things. And some teams were really into the robot, and I let them push that a little bit more, and some teams were completely into the project and let them push that. You have to make sure you honor the requirements for all 3 sections, but you can let the team find their own groove.
Were you looking for examples for core values challenges? Yeah, you can Google First Lego League core value challenges, and you'll find some blogs. Some are really good at documenting different ideas that you have. We found a lot of good ones on there.
You could also search for DI, Destination Imagination Instant Challenges. They're similar to those type of challenges.
And I want to point out that in those core values challenges, it's always more important how they go about things, not the result of the challenge. So if they are given a set of tools to make a tall building, they're not judged on how tall their building is. They're judged on how they get to where they got.
Hi. Last year was my first year, and we didn't get our Legos till October 31st. So we came in really late, so we went very simple. Had no idea what we were doing, so we never used sensors. But I noticed in the first, we did the December 19th qualifier. Our robot did really well, where we scored second, which was, anyway, we were really proud coming in so late. But I don't know if we did so well in that one, and then the championship, the robot didn't do anything well. I don't know if it's because we didn't position the paper properly, or we didn't use sensors to start. We would kind of just put the robot in on the wooden table. So my question was, should we be using like rotations and sensors? What's the best thing to be using to get your robot to do what you need it to do?
To be consistent?
Yeah, to be consistent instead of like doing whatever, like starting in the wrong spot and then it doesn't do anything right.
Yeah, it depends on the skill set of your team, first of all. There are definitely more simple ways to try to be more consistent, and then the more advanced with line following and gyro sensors and that kind of thing. But as far as starting in base, you do want to make sure that you're starting in a consistent place, especially if you're not using those sensors. So you can use what's called a jig, which is kind of equipment made out of Legos that positions your robot in a particular place. You can build like a block out of Legos that positions the robot a certain distance away from the wall, so it's always starting there. or you can, also do the sensors. And
Yeah, the funny thing about it, I've seen teams that only use move blocks score really high, and it's like, wow, that's impressive. But you're right, it's a lot more variation. You can be impacted by just something as minor as battery level. Like you're doing really good at 100% battery, but then you're not as consistent as at a 50% battery, which is the challenge when all you're doing is move blocks. So that could be what maybe impacted you. That's where learning how to use sensors can help, because then that can take out some of that variability. So there's definitely some things that you can do to help. What our team likes to do is there's an error rate within the motors. I think it's 1 degree per rotation. So the more rotations your wheels do, the more potential error. So essentially, the farther away you get from the base, the more turns you make, the more you potentially could be lost, even if it's doing everything the same. So we try to position the robot, if we have a really long run, either by using sensors or using the walls or using a mission model or something, just to kind of get our bearings before we continue on a really long run.
I would also add that the EV3 is a toy, so it will, it's a consumer toy. So you do have variance in the sensors and the motors. Lighting can affect if you use the light sensor, and then if you're using a jig, be careful relying on the border walls, because tables are not. There's 4x8-ish, and the alignment of the mat is against the north wall. There's a compass on the map, a north wall centered, so there will actually be. It's not south wall now? Oh, they changed it. Has it always been south wall? Oh, I'm losing my mind. But it's centered, so you still might have on the east and west side have a gap, and that will vary depending on the table, sometimes the weather, how warm the tables are. So you can have variance there. So, and the mats are not all cut the same. So there's a lot of variance in all parts of the robot game.
So sensors are a game changer. When your team's ready to start using sensors, they just transform everything. But a lot of our best missions just make use of what I'd call mechanical feedback, of like having a roller on the robot and it runs along a wall, or it backs against a wall to reposition. Some general principles, if you're just using the move blocks, is watch out for the power. The higher your power is, the more risk there is of wheels spinning, and we seem to see more variability in the robot. So when we were running with the large wheels, in general, we couldn't go over about 35 or 40% power before we started seeing more variability in the robot. So faster isn't always better. When they're aligning the robot, kids tend to fuss about X and Y dimensions and where the robot is, and that doesn't have anywhere near as big an effect as the angle of the robot. So getting the robot so it's pointed in a consistent direction, by the time you travel 4 feet across the mat, being off by 1 degree can mean you're off by several inches. So those sort of 2 things I think really help with mission consistency, and you're going to find that missions that are close to base are more consistent than missions that are far away. And the really advanced teams, you'll see string a minute or a minute and a half of missions together. Trying to start doing that isn't the best way. Short, a couple missions at a time and back to base gives you the chance to sort of tune and correct. But there are things you can do to make the simple move block missions score plenty of points, make you competitive for all the judging sessions.
Is the structure of the games and the missions like given to us? Like, do we know what the board looks like, or anything like that?
So the challenge is available online. There's a link on the flyer that was handed out that has all the materials. Once you register your team, you'll get it all sent to you. So the tables that we had here for the first session, which are out that corner now, you'll get that all in advance, and so you'll have 8 weeks depending on when your qualifier is, that you're going to attend to build a robot and practice and compete and get ready to compete.
One thing I'll add to that, as far as how your robot can be built and all those kind of rules, on First Lego League's website, which is firstinspires.org, they have the challenge guide for the hydrodynamic season. Highly recommend all the coaches download it and read through it. It's a lot more detailed than just the one-pager that shows how the missions score. A lot of the questions that were asked earlier in the robot game deep dive could have been answered just by reading this document. So I highly recommend not only the coaches read it, but have your team read it too.
And there's links on the back of the flyer under the materials section that takes you to those same resources.
You want your team to go back to that document several times during the season, reading it, but then, every time they have a question about a mission, ask them, okay, let's go to the mission guide and does it score? Show me where and how it scores, but keep referring back to it.
On the robot game itself, and then from a scoring perspective, is there a typical level from a first team perspective of like about this many points is about the what you would figure you're going to achieve?
So that's a hard one because they change the points every year. So there's no set maximum. It's kind of how they design it to how are the points they're going to let it fall. And so some years, 100 points is good.
That's going to vary greatly. We won't really know until the teams start going in and start solving. But like Michael said, every year the point value is vastly different. Was it last season we're like, whoa, that's solved the points that are on the board this year? Because the year prior you could have gotten upwards of 1,000 points. So it's going to vary greatly. The thing is just utilizing your 2.5 minutes to the best of your ability. So you're going to have to start strategizing on what is worth your time to try to engineer a solution. Is the point value worth the amount of time it's going to take to get there, or maybe should you move to a different mission on the board? It's really going to vary.
Just to kind of piggyback on that, I know a lot of first-year coaches are trying to figure out, okay, what do we need to do to advance from our qualifier to championship? Which is, that was our goal for our first year in our team. One of the best things that happened to our first year team was not advancing to championship. It was a heartbreaking day for the kids. They were torn up because they thought they did really good. But that experience helped to kind of refocus them. And the next season, they were a lot more tuned in with, okay, we're not just here playing with Legos. How do we actually get the sensors to work? They used sensors the second year. They didn't use them the first year. And just a lot more detail. So I think the overall learning experience for them was a lot richer, having gone through that and realized, kind of what was at stake. So some reassurance, especially for all your first-year coaches. Definitely have the team do as best as they can. Don't worry about if they don't advance to championship. It's a great goal to have, but it's not the end of the world if they don't.
I want to ask a question a little bit more about sensors. Last year, first time, everything we did was mechanical. I saw the power in the sensors, but said I don't want to go there yet. We want to go there this year, but what are some teaching moments that you kind of found that the successes of trying to get the kids to have that aha moment with the sensors?
If I'm going to start with one sensor, it would be the light sensor pointed down to see the black lines on the mat. To me, that's the basic one. You can make an argument for using the gyro sensor to control turns. But I would pick one, and you can use sensors in two main ways. The easiest or first step is a stop condition of go forward until a sensor reads something. So if you're going forward until your light sensor sees black, that would be a way to sort of gauge how far you are across the mat. I think that's a simple starting point. But I would suggest creating a task for the kids. Don't make it about the whole mission. Is how can we get this far across the table and stop and let them get to that moment. And then it's not going to work consistently. So if you have them start with black, they may get to a dark spot on the table and it triggers, or they may do some other things and it doesn't quite work the way they expected. And then the program is very direct. It reads for something. So what happened on the way to get there? And I think at the point that they can start troubleshooting and realizing what failed about it, that's when they start having those aha moments.
As far as aha moments for sensors, it is hard for kids to understand how a sensor works. So I don't know how you guys are programming your robots, but if you have a computer with Bluetooth that can connect wirelessly to your robot, we found it's really helpful because you can have the port view of the robot visible, and you can actually see the numbers that the sensors are giving you in real time as the robot's on the board. So we look at that a lot, especially with the light sensor. You can see when the sensor is over black, it's near 0, and when it's over white, it's near 100. And that helps to translate to the kids what these sensors are doing. It's taking real world information like light or sound or touch and converting it to a numerical number that you can then use to do things. But then beyond that, there's some really good resources online to learn how to use the sensors. A really good website is ev3lessons.com. It was put together by a First Lego League team a couple of years ago as their project, and it's since exploded and is huge and has dozens and dozens of lessons on how to use sensors, how to do different things with the robot. So highly recommend that.
And with the light sensor, make sure you read up on how to calibrate it, because that is very important to start with that. And then you can actually, when you come up to the table to set up for each match, you can recalibrate the sensor so that the lighting in our field rooms is going to be different than the pit rooms, different from home where you guys are working. So that process can help make sure that the robot gets better at acting as you expect on the competition fields.
The other tip, I guess, on sensors is what I would basically plagiarize. You know, take your team and let them see what other robots are doing at qualifiers or something and ask questions. And ask teams how they do things. And when they have those conversations, by the time we got to our third year or something, most of the ideas on the robot were taken from robots in previous competitions. And that can help them see the value in that is look at the teams that are doing well and go over and ask the kids questions. It's good for the teams you're asking questions of also. They get to practice talking about the robot.
And officially, that's not plagiarizing. We share our experiences with others. It's a core value.
One of the things we do with the kids that are new to programming is we don't even look at the board. If we have the robot built from last year or mock up one, we just say, build a Roomba. Work with the ultrasonic sensor and figure out what does it do? Think through the steps. So that's a good opportunity for them to learn and understand how the sensors work and not worry about points and things like that.
The one sensor to avoid is the sound sensor, because there's music, there's an MC. It'll probably be at its maximum sound level the entire time the robot's on the table. So it's not, don't use it. Any other questions? Okay, I did forget that to mention that Eric Person also took a team to the World Festival as well. So we have two up here who've done that. So I have a question for you guys. What was your favorite moment coaching a team? Was there an aha moment? There was an experience you had with your team that was really meant a lot to you?
Well, we've had many over the last 4 seasons, but one of the biggest for me was just contrasting where they started to where they are now. Our first season of 10 new kids and some fresh coaches who had no idea what they were doing. Some of the kids were so afraid to speak in front of adults, even just the 2 judges. So the skit our first year, we had a couple of kids, I think 3, who were literally plants. They stood there with leaves glued to them and their shirts, and they didn't speak. Couple that with 2 years down the road, they're in front of 200 Clovis Unified School math teachers advocating for STEM and the robotics program with confidence. They're up in front of these teachers, showing the importance of First Lego League, showing off their robot, talking about their project. I think that was a 2-year growth that's just going to be invaluable for those kids in the workforce, in college, and everything, and that was just huge.
I think for me is when I see the team come together in the challenges, like the instant challenges for the core values, and see them stop, talk to each other, start communicating, working out the issues. Those skills are invaluable throughout life. So that was my big moment.
Yeah, I mean, definitely what Lane was talking about was one of my favorites. But also another one that just I enjoy is you'll find different kids on the team are going to gravitate toward different skills. Some are really going to like the research on the project and just diving in deep there or trying to figure out some kind of solution. Others are going to be all about the programming. Others all about building the robot. We've got one kid on our Alta Sierra team where he's always kind of been our engineer. He loves building on the robot. He can build anything. And he's always said, oh, I'm not a programmer. He kind of stay away from the computer. And then I think it was either last season or the season before, anytime someone's on the computer programming, we mirror that to a TV so that everyone in the room can see it. Makes it a lot easier rather than everyone huddling around a computer. But he's across the room, and he's telling the guy on the computer, he's correcting how he's doing programming, basically saying, no, you did it wrong, here's how you need to do it. And so from across the room, he's doing programming, so that told us, okay, here's a kid that said, I'm not a programmer, but he's picking it all up. He knows how to program. He just doesn't want to be on the computer. So just being around all this, he absorbed it all, and now he's probably one of our better programmers now, even though he wouldn't admit it himself. Right? He doesn't do it himself, but he knows what they're doing, and he knows how to instruct it.
In 8 years, there's a whole lot of memories of things like this. I'll pick a sort of a different style. Is the Hand of Poseidon year, the Nature's Fury year, in our qualifier at Duncan in the core values session. The challenge that year was to make a billboard to promote and advertise FLL, and it was the first judging session of our qualifier day, and I was anxious and everything, but the kids sat down and I'm sitting there and I can see them going down the rubric and checking the boxes, and I remember Jenna, she's around here somewhere, started divvying up the team, and they listed all the core values out on the piece of paper, and they had them all memorized, all the words perfect, and I could see all the teaching that we had done over 2 to 3 years, and that they actually retained it and remembered it, and it was just one of those, you could see the team come together, and it's like, okay, the whole rest of the year is going to be fantastic. This is a piece of cake. And once in a while, you get those moments where you can see the whole team is dialed in, and that was a good day.
Just a couple of comments. I'm the robotics coordinator here at Alta Sierra, and happily 3 of those are my coaches up there. So it's a heartwarming thing to see them doing what they're doing now. But you were talking about some of the time elements and some of the late starts. I will tell you, the first year that Alta Sierra sent a team to the World Challenge, I remember having the parent meeting on October 10th that year. So we were way behind. But as much as that is as a late start, it also allows for the teams to develop a little bit of a intensity and like, oh, we know we've got to do this. So they become very ultra focused very, very soon. We talked a little bit about conditions at table and getting the robot to repeat. Some of the things that I've seen over the years, I'll go by and watch a team practice and their table won't be level. And so they're running all these missions on a table that's not level. Sometimes it's in a room where Dad's doing a lot of sawdust work and stuff, and the table will be real slick.
Or clay.
Even Laney and I, last year we were trying to set up an exhibition. We took a table that had been sitting in my room where I do ceramics, put it out there. The wheels would get no traction. They were just spinning. I mean, it was literally it was a failure. We just had to take our lumps and say, okay, that's not exactly what we wanted. And the last thing was we were mentioning about points and what does it take to do so well. Remember, there's 3 elements. So we tend to focus on the game challenge all the time and how many points do we get there. But it's all 3 elements together. But another thing that I try to talk to my teams about, and I can never convince them, when I remember like 2 or 3 years ago, the points you needed at the first competition to qualify was 90. And by the time you got to the last qualifier, you needed like 200. So you're trying to achieve a percentage of teams that are there. So teams tend to want to give themselves a lot of time, and they sign up for those later qualifiers. But realize that all the teams are doing that, and they're all working on their stuff all that time. So sometimes those earlier qualifiers, if you can get your kids going, you don't have to score quite so high.
If you're at a school with more than one team, I would start talking to the other coach now and set up a meeting the week before your qualifier try running your robot on someone else's table, have your team present their project and their robots and all those things. Remember, we have to share our experiences with others. Share it with the other team, get some feedback, and you have essentially checked several of the requirement boxes. And it's better to share your experience with stakeholders and people that are more vested, but you've at least covered the minimum requirement for the qualifier. But running the robot one time on somebody else's table can catch a lot of the mistakes with your setup of the game table.
Yeah, and that's where I know Michael mentioned a scrimmage coming up next month. If you have the time to take your team there, huge opportunity for your first-year teams because they can practice on numerous tables, they can see other robots, they can get a feel for the competition, so it's not all brand new on the day of the qualifier.
The scrimmage is very laid back. It may only just be the project judging session. It's a subset of a normal day, but it is definitely recommended to go, even if you just want to come to watch, but definitely to participate. It gives an experience to the kids so it's not all new, as Ken said. There'll be more details about what exactly Buchanan's going to do as we work that out with them. So that'll be posted online. October 21st. Doesn't have to be done. It can be in whatever state you want it to be in, just to run a couple missions. It's there for practice.
It's also a really fantastic time to get feedback if your robot is having trouble and it's getting stuck somewhere. There'll be experienced coaches and experienced team members.
And especially at Buchanan, they've got a lot of First Lego League alumni on their high school team, and so they'll be around to help provide guidance and mentoring there at that scrimmage.
You know, one other thing I want to mention I don't know if we've talked about it yet today, but obviously there's project, there's core values, there's robot. One thing you should practice with your team, once you kind of get your robot runs down, have them practice scoring so that and I know that we have scoring sheets available on Central Valley Robotics website. Have them practice scoring their own robot because it's going to be up to the team to score the mission with the refs. And the refs are really good, but at the same time, they may not know the game as well as your team does because they've been working on it for months. The refs may have just volunteered in the last week or two. And they're human like everybody, so occasionally they make mistakes. And it's hard, especially for younger kids, 4th, 5th graders, to tell an adult they're wrong. But for them, they have to know the game, and they have to know it well enough and be able to communicate that with respect if there is a scoring error. Because as a coach, it's not something you can do. It's up to the team to meet with the ref and score the game properly. So definitely have them practice scoring.
Yeah, and along with that, every time one of your team members has a question about how something scores, don't just answer them. Send them to the document. We have the one-page summary. We have it taped to our wall. And if somebody says, hey, what if we can score it by putting this under that or whatever, and you say, can you do that? And they're like, I don't know. Like, go to the board. Go look. What does it say? And it might say, you can't have it touching something. It has to be on the mat. So anytime that you can turn the kids toward the documentation and educate them to kind of ingrain it to them to go to the source, the better they know it and the more they can advocate for themselves when something might be in question.
I'm just going to sort of interject my own question, and that's how on earth do you manage a team, particularly a large team? Ryan right over there was my assistant coach or lifesaver when we were doing Hand of Poseidon. You're not alone. Organize and recruit the parents. Get an assistant coach if you don't have one already. Get one of the families to organize snacks and get the parents talking to each other. You have plenty to do. You don't have to do it all yourself. Delegate.
So on that score sheet, we'll be posting it soon. First, just released it to us, and we put our logo on it, do a couple changes, so we'll put that on our website. It'll be the same thing the kids see. The referees will actually go over the score with the kids, and the kids have to initial the paper. So it's very important that the kids are aware of it. They've seen it before. They know what it's like. The referees don't calculate score. It gets entered into a computer, and that computer is what calculates the score. There was something else, but I've forgotten.
Along with scoring, when they're practicing on the board, have the kids be the ones that reset the mission models every time. That way they know where they go, they're paying attention to the lines, the parameters. Just make sure they're the ones that are setting it up, because when they come to the board for the robot game competition, they're the ones that need to check the board to make sure everything's right. The refs will do everything in their power to make sure that it is set up right. They might miss something. They're human. We miss things all the time. So if the kids are the ones that are always setting it back up, if they knock something down or if they've scored a mission, they'll learn it a lot better that way as well.
And just when it comes to the challenge guide, there's no necessarily hidden rules or hidden text. It's pretty much verbatim. So if it doesn't say you can't do something, then you probably can do it. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to email us, reach out to our Facebook group, and we can help answer any questions. Or as we have our coach seminar phone calls, we'll have our head ref on there who can help clarify things as he would read the rules, because there are some vague parts to the challenge, and it kind of comes down to head ref interpretation sometimes. So those are kind of opportunities to get anything clarified. Either Facebook or through our contact at cvrobotics.org email. So that's the national system. First is kind of, when it comes to North America, they leave it up to head ref and region discretion at certain times. They do have the challenge updates, which are ultimate kind of law in how the challenge is interpreted. So if they change something in the challenge updates, that's an official change that everyone has to abide by. But if there's no official ruling on some sort of vagueness in the rules, it ultimately comes down to how CVR and our regional head ref will interpret it, and even down to how the head ref at the site, the qualifier, will interpret it. And at the qualifier level, the qualifier head ref is final decision on any rule interpretation. So that's why we have our coaches meeting in the morning of all of our qualifiers. It's a chance to get anything brought up, answered, and then that's how it will be treated for the rest of the day. But first has something with November and all that stuff. Oh, November 5th thing on our website? Yeah, that was from last year, and we totally forgot to move it. That was when some of us went to Rome, and no one was going to be able to answer the email, and I totally forgot to remove that message. So I only realized that a couple weeks ago. Oops.
They are very accessible, very accessible.
So there's plenty. So you're welcome to email us at any time now.
I wanted to know what you found the best practice time. Like, I only had 5 kids, or 9-year-olds last year, but we do the project, and then 2 kids would come and do the robot or programming, and it'd alternate. But then the other kids would just become disinterested and start running around and playing, and then the kids who were working wanted to do that, and so it was just a nightmare. So then I started like figuring 2 kids at a time, just come, but I don't know, is there like a special magic thing?
It can be a little bit like herding cats at times. He recommended use other parents. So sometimes if you have a parent that can help out, or an assistant coach or a mentor, they can take a group aside to work on one project while other team works on designing the robot or strategy for which missions they want to do. We find that if we separate and do different things throughout the practice, so we work on the robot a little while, and then a core values challenge, and then maybe talk about the project, that kind of gets them refocused on the work and instead of running around.
Yeah, you can play with different things to see what works with your team. Last year, we even tried half of the team coming for an hour and then half of the team coming for the next hour, but we had a 15-minute time where they were both there to kind of update each other what they were doing, and that worked for a little while, but it just kind of depends on the maturity level, and like Roland said, just recruit some parents to kind of keep them on task too.
Yeah, dividing and conquering sometimes helps. I know a couple of years ago, one of our more productive meetings was when no one showed up. For our meeting, we said, okay, all of you guys stay at home, get on your computers, get on a Google Doc. They had to make their script for their presentation. And so we said, okay, all you guys stay at home, get on a Google Doc, collaborate together. And so it was a virtual meeting. And so there was no running around or horseplay or anything like that. They're all working. It was great. We got a lot done in the meeting.
It gets better. Fourth grade, attention span's about 15 minutes. And so never ran practices more than 2 hours. And we always had, breaks structured, and we would say, okay, so what's the next step? Let's work on that step. You're going to report to the team. We'd split the team between project and robot, and you're going to report back to the team in 20 minutes, so get something done. By the time they're in 8th grade, we could have 3-4 hour sessions, and they'd be on task the whole time, and you're thinking, why am I ever going to go back? Then your next kid's ready for FLL, and there you are again. So I think you have to figure out what the kids can do and structure practices accordingly, and the attention span may be 10 or 15 minutes, and so then you have to have resets every 10 or 15 minutes, or it's going to devolve.
Yeah, and I mean, we've had teams that meet on a Saturday for 4 hours, or they'll meet for an hour 4 times a week, or they'll meet twice a week for 2 hours or 3. It will ultimately depend on what your kids can even schedule in. They may have sports, they may have other things. So it'll just, it's very kind of team dependent, but again, breaks are, I know some teams, their favorite time is snack time.
And you already answered some of my questions by the others, but this is the first year doing a junior Lego League. So first time for the kids and first time for the parents, coaches. So any, recommendations, suggestions about?
For a junior team? So I had a junior team last year as a pilot team, and it is vastly different from the first Lego League, the older kids. I would definitely recruit some help. Those kids are a lot younger. Their attention span is a lot shorter. And so just chunking up into little tasks is the best thing for them. And the meeting guide, have you gotten your meeting guide yet? That is a really great setup. It kind of tells you exactly what you need to accomplish in what amount of time. I would get a head start on your Show Me poster, though, especially on the bios on the team. That's not dependent on any research or things that you've done. So if you can get your team photos taken and the little About Me section taken care of, just kind of split it up so that you're not overwhelmed with, we have the Show Me poster at the very last minute to get ready. So just kind of follow the meeting guide and just kind of go where the kids take you.
Okay, that's good. I hate hearing my own voice. So we don't really have an issue with the kids like focusing and paying attention really, and in fact our meetings kind of run on longer than we want them to be. But it seems like throughout the rest of the week, we don't talk to each other. So we've had 3 meetings, and it's kind of like, all right, here's your assignments, and we're on I don't know if you've heard of Telegram, but we have a Telegram group chat thing that we kind of communicate through. But it seems like most of the time throughout that week, it's almost like I feel like I should be doing something, and we're not really. So do you have any advice for that? I don't really know what to do with it. My head's kind of...
Are you talking more about how you want your team to be more cohesive, or you feel like they should be constantly like doing a little bit each day to accomplish goals?
Well, I guess so. I feel like the only time we do anything is during our meetings.
Okay.
So we also have, and it kind of sounds like there's usually only one coach. Is that right? Okay, because we have
it depends.
project and
so Roland's team has 3 coaches, and we have us. We not always, but we assign homework to our kids.
Yeah, we do that too, but it just seems we don't really talk to each other. So by the time we get to the meeting, it's like, well, what did we work on? I don't know. We try, but it's just So
Are you just meeting once a week or
Thursdays and Fridays?
Thursdays and Fridays.
About an hour and a half each.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that too, if that works better for the schedule.
So I've had in-between meeting activities. The homework's a big one. And my favorite homework is we're just going to open practice. We're going to have 2 minutes, and you're going to tell me one of the core values you applied outside of FLL. That's one of the questions the judges will ask. I don't think it's required, but I can't think of a session where the core values judges didn't ask, give us an example of a core value and how you applied it outside of FLL. So that and sort of reinforcing the core values is a great in-between activity. As you get close to the competition, we would sometimes have the kids that were going to be doing most of the running the robot come in and practice swapping attachments. As far as getting them to talk, last season the kids would write the scripts and they do the Google Docs and sort of collaborate, but it was essentially holding them accountable for the homework that creates that in-between meeting activity. Yeah. One of my best teams was Friday night and Saturday morning, so I don't think it's needed. I think the question from a coach's perspective is what can they be working on outside of normal meeting times, and a big one there is sort of understanding of core values and bringing some project research or project ideas to the meeting, and you just have to right at the start of the meeting ask for them to share those things and make them accountable for having done it.
And you could, if time allows and the desire is there, you could work on team cohesiveness with doing something outside of First Lego League. You can go to a movie, you can have a swim night, you can do things that kind of make them feel more like a team. Yeah, team building.
So we're out of time. It is 11 o'clock, and we've got to run and get ready for our next session. So I want to thank you guys for speaking this morning. If you do have any other questions, they'll be around. You can talk during lunch. But next up in here, we have our topic experts, and I'll be running the online tools session in the NPR. So thank you guys, and good luck with the rest of the day.